When did you start like getting your interest? Like,
Yeah, so I literally did not like, and this is actually quite like funny because I didn't know anything about composting before I started Monty. Like I literally knew nothing. I had always been an environmentalist, but I didn't even have a compost bin at home. I didn't know anything about it. But what happened was, so yeah, so I was always into into the environment, into nature, into addressing climate change, all of that stuff. And I was kind of looking for ways to do that with my life. And I was reading, and it's such a cliche, but I literally just read this book, and it was talking about a lot of the agricultural problems that climate change is going to cause. And one of them was like soil damage and soil degradation. And along with that, it was suggesting solutions. And one of it was compost. And so I guess I just got kind of, it's like when it's like when you go down a rabbit hole on something on the internet and you just you stumble across something that is just, you knew nothing about, but it just has so much impact and it has so much potential. And for me with composting, it ticked so many boxes. Like not only is it this amazing environmental solution, from a commercial perspective, every single human on earth produces organic waste that can be composted. Like to be human means you can be a composter. Like that's something that kind of really appealed to me, is that composting isn't like a nice to have thing. Being able to recycle our organic waste is as essential as renewable energy, as like recycling plastic. So it was really interesting area that I'd never even heard about, organic waste and the things associated with that. So yeah, I just went down a rabbit hole, and then I just started reading about it more and more, and that was like 3 years ago now, and now I just know way too much about composting to be healthy for like one person. The amount I think about the word compost is scary in itself.
oh, that's insane. Did you study like environmentalism at all, or just?
No, I studied business management and IT.
You're
So
kidding.
I know, I did when I was in high school, and family and stuff, they were all into the natural sciences. So like I did have some background with it. I wasn't coming out of absolutely nothing to do with like organic chemistries and things like that. So I knew a little bit about it, but no actual formal study in it. My degree was in business management and information technology, so like a dual. But I think in terms of composting, what it is, it's not necessarily like, you do need to understand kind of the biology and all that stuff involved in it, but I guess from a optimization perspective or an engagement perspective, it's just all processes. Like it's just like everything else. It's like once you know the moving parts in composting, those things like the carbon nitrogen ratio, the moisture percentage, oxygen levels, once you know the levers that you need to pull in composting, it starts to become just like optimizing for any other process that you do with technology, which is what I was studying. So I think that's probably why I was able to come up with Monty being a compost technology, because I wasn't someone coming from industry. Like I think if I was studying compost and I did have like all of the, if I was studying compost, I probably wouldn't have done this, because I would have realized how complicated it was before I started, and I would have been like, someone would be stupid to have to try to make that. But I didn't realize how complicated it was until I was like 2 years into it. So now it's too fucking late. Sorry. I think that in terms of like learning about it, it's all been self-taught on the compost knowledge side. But when you read about something and it's all you think about for 3 years straight, you start to accumulate enough knowledge. But then on the side of what I did already know, which was technology and business, that kind of allowed me to combine it with the compost knowledge and idea.
That's insane. Like just like hearing about that, like you didn't even like study like the whole composting thing, and then
no,
something out of it is like that's so cool.
I was kind of just thinking of it from the process perspective, like what is composting if not turning organic waste into this fertilizer, this end product, and I guess that process that is composting was kind of like just this black box that was like, okay, well, if we can monitor, Monty monitor this process, and we can identify all the different moving parts, we can learn a lot more about it. And you don't have to be, and therefore you don't have to be an expert. You don't have to know everything about it. We can use these technologies and these tools to make it accessible to anyone. And I think coming from that angle of complete naivety and ignorance of anything related to the practicalities of compost was really helpful in advising how we design the product, because we were designing the product for ourselves as much as we were for other people. And we were people who knew nothing about compost. Always being able to come at it from that angle of the user who knows nothing was actually helpful for us in creating something. You know what I mean?
You started Monty 3 years ago, is that right?
I started researching it, in halfway through 2018, which was when I read that book. And I just got obsessed with it. And with that research, I came my UQ was offering this, University of Queensland had this competition for like a startup idea, and the top prize was like 25,000, and it was for like sustainable engineering. And I didn't think I was like going to get it, but I'm like, you know what, I really like researching this topic. I'll put together a proposal, see if I can get something out of it, or even if I don't, it'll be interesting to explore. But I ended up getting the full amount, and it was like a prize, and they put it in my personal bank account. And so I was like, oh shit. Because like I'm going into that's at my graduation, so I was meant to be getting a grad job, but instead all I was doing was working on like this weird compost thesis document. I ended up writing like 15,000 words. It was insane. Yeah, and so that was this idea for like some compost monitoring technology, and ended up getting that kind of startup capital to go and make something of it. So that was insane. And from that, I guess that was at the end of 2018, and I was kind of like, well, I could leave this as an idea and just kind of make it a nice to have, or I could, run with it and see where it goes. And so, so I applied for an accelerator at UQ, which had some more funding. It was like 6 months long, meant to help you grow a startup. And I got into that. So 2019 was when I started like full time. This is actually a company. That thing, and it was crazy, like the whole time since. So yeah, it's been 2.5 years. Wow, that's kind of terrifying, because oh my gosh, it's just crazy thinking back on everything that's happened in that time and how much it's changed. It's been a long 3 years though since dipping my toes into the compost world.
Like you would have never thought this was going to be your path,
Oh my god, never. Like I still don't believe it's like it's
yourself, and you're like, oh my gosh, is this even real?
Oh, it was so scared. I was so scared. Like, but that was like really when I started doing like public speaking and pitching really early on. And like when I was doing it, I was so scared. Like I was like shaking. And now after 3 years of doing it, I just don't even care anymore. I'll just roll up now in front of a crowd of like 1,000 people. I'm like, what's up, everyone? So
it gained your confidence.
Yeah. I don't know if it's I gained my confidence or I just kind of like stopped caring as much. But it's really interesting seeing all the different things that have to happen to bring a technology startup to life, or whatever you want to call it. But I do think that, because I was studying business and I did a few subjects in startups and innovation, and I think that compost is an industry that needs innovation. It's an industry that needs new thinking, modern technologies. It needs to be just reinvigorated. Like compost is as old as agriculture, like which is something that like literally for as long as human civilization has existed, so has composting. It's this integral part to sustaining us. It closes that loop on life and death. That is what composting is. And yet it's still kind of seen as just boring, rotting food waste in a bin. And to me, that's just crazy, because it's like, this has so much potential. And I think that what I found is that it's too hard to get people excited about composting on its merits alone. Like, not everyone is as crazy just about, black soldier fly larvae and worms as we are. So I think what I found is that, things like modern technology, like apps, like gamification, like all of that cool, trendy stuff are tools that we can use to get every single person interested in composting their home scraps, whether it's in their own worm farm, whether it's in a backyard bin, whether it's in a compost, like a community garden down the road. There are ways that we can get every single household and person, not putting their organic waste in the bin, but putting it into the compost. And like, that's just in terms of the impact that would have, it's just insane. I'm so grateful that I get to work in something every single day that's making an impact. And I think that's one thing that is really great about composting and companies like us that are creating products where every KPI for us, like every dollar of profit we make. So from a commercial perspective, every new user, every new customer, every new dollar of revenue or profit, that's equal to an increase in composting, which is equal to an increase in carbon emissions offset, of recycling, of pollution. Like, it's really, like, it's just insane being in these companies where, profit is actually tied to impact, if that kind of makes sense, as opposed to like these other companies that don't have that. Like, they have to derive their impact from other stuff. For us, it's kind of like every new customer we get is another person that we're empowering to compost.
That's just it. That's our motivation, I guess. It's not even just like that. It's the whole impact on the world, and like
exactly
the whole idea, and like the world is like enough.
Globally, we produce 3 billion tons of organic waste. That's like 3 billion tons from households and from agriculture is organic waste that is just rotting, that is releasing methane, that is just so wasted. With composting and all the different applications of it, with recycling that organic waste, we have the potential to completely remove those emissions and sequester carbon for literally decades. Like, the end product of compost can actually suck carbon out of the air. It's a carbon sink. There's 4 times more carbon that's stored in the soil than is stored in all the trees on Earth. Like, it's, which is insane. So like, there are just so many avenues down which like compost has the potential to make the world a better place. And then you start bringing in, I think, especially when you get composters, so you bring in the community angle, it's something that it's one of those things that everyone composts. It can be something that brings everyone together. So I think that there are it's just a really exciting area to be in. It is really cool thinking about like all the different opportunities with composting, because it is a very big kind of catch-all for a lot of different areas. And I think we're in the consumer composting space, so like households and small scale composting. But I think what I've found more and more that's very interesting is kind of consumer versus commercial composting. And obviously, and I never really come outright and say this, but commercial composting just doesn't have the future scalability that consumer individual composting does. Like, especially as like we get larger and larger like suburbs and stuff like that, people don't want to be living near commercial composting facilities. Running them, operating them is so costly, and it's so difficult to get done correctly, just by pure merit of the size of it, just because it's too big. Like, you talk to these commercial compost operators and they're really struggling in terms of how to manage piles, how to manage contamination, how to manage aeration, all of these things. And it's like, you just don't have that problem when it's just one person in their backyard. The future of getting everyone in society composting, which is the North Star, it's everyone compost their organic waste, is smaller scale operations using, you know, products like Tumbleweed and Monty and things like that, like actually enabling at a household level people to do it. And, you know, when you see things like FOGO and stuff and like organic waste collection from door to door, and it's like you lose, I can't remember the exact stat, but it's something like half of the nitrogen in organic waste is lost as nitrous oxide in the first 3 days of decomposition. It's something ridiculously huge, but like for those FOGO systems, by the time that waste has even been collected by these pollution emitting trucks, transported to a grinder, transported to a commercial composting facility, most of the like emissions that it would emit anyway have been emitted. Like, unless you're putting it like straight into a compost bin, you're not having an environmental impact. It's really interesting, the future of managing our organic waste and how it's going to be done. And I think as the science becomes clearer and the customer demand increases, people will start to realize that only doing it in their backyard or in a community garden or nearby, that's the only way they can ensure that it's being done like environmentally soundly and effectively. So